And so another year of whole limited sales comes to an end for Star Citizen. And this has been a really, really interesting one. It's fair to say there is a lot less to go around today than there was 6 months ago or 12 months ago. Star Citizen is now growing at a rate which has never been seen before. And to be honest, I don't think we are keeping up with demand. Join me today as I'm going to be doing a bit of a different video and running through the figures and the financials of Star Citizen and estimating the sales of the Idris and the Javelin for 2025. Now, I'm going to be focusing on two sales in the year: the Intergalactic Aerospace Expo, which was in November 2025, and Fleetweek, which was in May of 2025. This is going to be a bit different for me, and there's not really going to be any gameplay in this one. So I would ask you to just maybe try and support it a bit more than usual. If you really could give it a like and a thumbs up, it will help, because I suspect this video may struggle ever so slightly. But it's taken a god load of work, so yeah, it'd be great if you could help it. Let's just start off with where am I getting numbers from. So for those of you who don't know, Star Citizen reports their hourly income on their store. However, there's also really useful people who make spreadsheets which automatically grab this information and put all the data in. So all I have to do is go in, grab the hours I need from the hundreds of thousands of lines in this spreadsheet, and then start to play around with it in Excel. Now, I seem to spend my entire day job in Excel. I come home and then I use Excel to manage an org. So it's fair to say I love a bit of Excel. So this was really interesting. Now, the backstory of why I wanted to do this was because I tried to buy a Javelin this year with store credit. Now, let me be clear, I had to melt everything to do this. But I actually thought it was possible. I've never tried to buy a whole limited ship with store credit before, so I thought, how hard can it be? Spoiler alert, really, really hard. And that got me thinking, how many ships does CIG actually sell from a whole limited wave? And well, it's only taken a good few hours of going through the data, and then even more hours making a PowerPoint. So if you like the PowerPoint, let me know. Thank you very much. And without further ado, folks, let's get right into it. So I'm going to set the scene of Star Citizen in 2025, because for those of you who may not keep up with the day-to-day information of Star Citizen, you may have no idea how much this game has grown in 2025. Like, it is ridiculous. There has been almost 640,000 new accounts made in 2025. This is not the highest year we've ever had, but it is currently on track to be the third highest year, possibly second highest year, depending on how December goes, but we'll see at that point. Of that number, 127,000 new accounts were made in November alone. Now, this is by far one of the most successful Novembers CIG has ever had. This makes up 20% of their overall new players for the year. Now, comparing to 2024 gives us a rough idea of how amazing these figures are, but 2024 was sort of a lull just due to how unplayable the game was at points, and it was coming off the back of 2023, which was CIG's most financially profitable year if we exclude 2025, which has blown things out the water. So in 2025 alone, we've had $144 million of new pledges. This is by far the highest, and there is no comparison at this point. So yeah, incredible. Same again, November has been the biggest month ever for Star Citizen, with almost $32 million in sales. Now, what's interesting here is I see quite a few people who go, oh, well, they're just selling the Idris and the whole limited ships more to make this money, on top of the new releases such as the Perseus. And what you'll see as we go on is CIG makes comparatively little money from the whole limited ships. And that can be seen below, really. 22% of CIG's income this year was raised in November, which is actually sort of in line with their usual years. 70% 2024, 24% 2023, which, as I said, was that bumpy year. And the one that really blew me away was the average account value is now $149. When I do podcasts with Guns, which I'll link below, we usually say the average account is about a Cutlass Black, which is $110 if I'm not mistaken. But this has really skyrocketed over the years. And before we move on, I just want to highlight what I mean by new account. So new account is anyone who goes on right now and creates an account for free. This does not mean you have purchased anything in the game. So the average account value and new accounts is sort of a misleading statistic, but it's the best we can do to really get a rough idea of how many accounts there are. I've set the groundworks, let's get underway. So here we have an hourly breakdown of the sales figures for Aegis Dynamics on IE 2025. So overall, Aegis Day made $3.8 million. Now, this also includes obviously the other show that was available and the other ships that were already available from other days in IAE that have already happened. So these numbers may be slightly off. But as you'll see, the average income of $93,000 is a very, very important number. So I think we're still running with fairly usable figures here. And overall, the average income from an Idris and Javelin wave was $353,000. That's a lot of money. Now, if we took that $350,000 by itself and just assumed that was pure Idris and Javelin money, we'd be way off with this estimate. Because as I said, every hour we're estimating approximately $93,000 of other sales income, which does not relate to the limited sales. And so what I've now done is stripped away all of this other income, so we are left with a wonderful adjusted income, which I'm calling the Adjusted Limited Wave Income, or ALWI. So if you see ALWI, it just means basically this is what I'm forecasting the wave income to be from selling the Idris and the Javelin. And a really big thing to flag here is on all of these pages, I'm only looking at war bond or real money transactions. I cannot see store credit, and I cannot know if a sale was 50% store credit, 50% war bond. So as we move through these graphs, I'm assuming everything is war bond. Now for wave one, it's always quite a tricky thing to calculate because we have the initial huge drush that you see every single day of IE. People want to pick up the new ship, they want to pick up the CCU of the day, which sometimes are quite good. They also want to pick up the war bond of the day if there is one. This is where forecasting Aegis is absolutely perfect because Aegis never has anything new. They are such a dull manufacturer. I mean, they are my favorite manufacturer, but they are so dull from releases. We never ever see new things for Aegis. So what that means is we can very easily go back and compare this data with other points such as Fleetweek and actually get a very comparative set of data. Now, after removing the other income from the wave income, I've estimated that CIG made approximately $1.4 million of ALWI. So that's basically saying I think they've made $1.4 million from selling the Idris and the Javelin for the Intergalactic Aerospace Expo. And also, I'm not going to be including the final 6 waves CIG did on the last day. So forecasting wave 1 can be quite tricky because we cannot use the information prior to wave 1 because Aegis Day wasn't on at that point. For this reason, I've been using an exponential decay model, which is effectively saying every hour that passes from wave 1 is less and less important on the size of wave 1. And on this, I've then applied a 0.75 rate modifier just to get the figures vaguely in line with what I'm expecting. So as you can see, the wave income is progressively dropping from wave 1 to 6, and the adjusted limited wave income is steadily tapering off over the whole day. For waves 2 to 6, the forecasting is really, really simple. What I've done is taken the 3 hours before each wave and used that as the average income and then assumed that was the average income for the wave. So with that all being said, I've now made a lovely table to work out how many ships CIG has approximately sold in the period. Here we have one of our most interesting hurdles, which is to question how many ships does CIG actually sell of each type. Obviously, it will not be 50-50. It could be 75, it could be 90. And what this chart means is for every 1 Idris sold, I'm assuming CIG has sold 1 Javelin. Or for every 90 Idrises sold, I'm assuming CIG has sold 1 Javelin. You'll see these are color-coded red, yellow, green. My personal opinion will be in the green column. So I'm assuming CIG is selling 9 Idrises for 1 Javelin. And from trying to buy the Javelin this year, I think that could be fairly on par. So if we take the assumption of 9 to 1, CIG has sold approximately 774 Idrises on Aegis Day in 2025. Now that doesn't seem like a very big number, and it's only going to get worse as we go through here. So there's a few interesting things to take from looking at this graph. The first is each wave is definitely not the same. Now, even if we assume that my calculation for background other income is incorrect, we can see a huge taper as we go from wave 1 to wave 6, even if we ignore any such background calculations. So this really means that if you're not getting something wave 1, every single wave after that will get harder and harder and harder. And if this is true, it's a very interesting question from the point of view that CIG now do 6 waves to cater for all time zones. And at least from this information, CIG is quite clearly not catering for all time zones in the same manner. But showing you these numbers is fairly useless if I don't give you anything to compare it to. So I have also gone and done the exact same calculations for Fleetweek in 2025. Once again, I'm only looking at Aegis Day. If CIG did any other sales of the Idris, I'm ignoring them for now. Now, this was the first time that the Idris has been sold as a straight to flyable ship. For this reason, we can see that they went absolutely wild on the first few waves, with income of almost $900,000 for wave 1 alone. Like, that is utterly insane. Now, before we go any further, look at the average income figure for non-wave hours. $92,000. This is within 2% of the IAE hourly income for Aegis Day. This gives us a really good guideline to show that actually consumer spending is very, very similar for Aegis as a brand on its day in a limited sale day. And what that means is we can model our limited wave income curve off IAE's Aegis Day. And that's exactly what I've done here. So I forecasted that CIG has made $1.9 million of income from the Idris and Javelin waves. As I said before, I've used another exponential decay model for wave 1, and this time I have based it off the information we learnt from IAE in 2025. Now this could be totally wrong, but just ask yourself the question, why on earth would people suddenly be buying loads of Aegis equipment in Fleetweek, but they weren't buying it in IAE this year? No new ships came out on either day, and I believe both war bonds were fairly bad. And now something really interesting to look at here is Wave 6. Wave 6 was absolutely tiny. I really would love to know how CIG plan these waves. Now, I don't work in marketing, but I like to think I can do a little bit of marketing. If I wanted to scare people into buying a ship, I would make it very hard to buy in waves 1, 2, and 3, and then make it very easy to buy in wave 6. Why? Well, because people may try their luck, like I did with store credit in the early waves, and then as the day goes on, they'll start to panic and realize, oh, I must get the ship, so I will use real money. But that doesn't seem to be the case here. As time goes on, every single wave, it becomes harder and harder to buy the ship you actually want. And if we put this information into sales, here we can see it. With $1.9 million generated over the 6 waves after adjustments for other income, I can estimate that CIG sold approximately 1,102 Idrises, assuming the 9 to 10 coefficient again with the Javelin. Now, if you are trying to buy a Javelin, let's just stop here and just, feel sorry for you for a minute. Obviously, you have $3,000 to spend, so congratulations. But there are thousands of people trying to pick up the ship, if not tens of thousands, and you have 122 to buy on my model. Best of luck to you. If this is what CIG is offering for Warbond, then the store credit offerings must be absolutely abysmal. To be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if CIG is selling 1 Javelin per wave just to say they have done it and they are forcing you to use real money. So just to be clear on that point, this is not meant to be an accusation that CIG doesn't sell enough ships for store credit or that they're forcing us to buy anything with real money. At the end of the day, you're presumably an adult with your own money. You do not need to buy this ship, absolutely. While a company could pressure you to buy this ship, this is the exact same as a betting company encouraging you to go spend your money, or an alcohol company encouraging you to go and get drunk. You have to be the one who says no if you don't want something. Let's put this into a little summary. At best, 774 Idrises were sold via Warbond at IE 2955. This is approximately 20 to 30% less than they were sold at Fleetweek of the same year. Now remember what I said earlier, there are 120,000 new accounts in November alone. So assuming that everyone wanted it, well, there would be 0.58% of an Idris per person to go around. Make no mistake, this is a very, very expensive ship. But this game attracts very, very wealthy people. And therefore, it cannot be argued that this ship is not in massive demand. Every single wave of the Idris and Javelin sold out within 5 seconds. Every single wave of the Idris and Javelin with store credit sold out immediately. And I really do mean immediately. I was there for every single wave, And you can see how sometimes a ship would not even go back to being out of stock. They would simply roll straight on to being sold out. And this is where things get really, really interesting. So at best, I estimate it takes someone 10 seconds to navigate the pledge store when spending real money because they skip a few steps in the checkout phase. This is assuming zero latency, zero lag, zero waiting for a button to appear or thinking about which button I need to click. And yet somehow every single wave sold out within 5 seconds on wave 1. Now the interesting thing here is wave 1 is much harder to get than the other waves simply because there's more steps to go through. In waves 2 onwards, you can just wait in your cart for something to come back in stock. If you want me to do a full video on this, let me know and I'll happily do that. People have got really, really, really quick in 2025. So quick, in fact, that some may argue bots are getting involved. Now, of course, botting is totally against Cloud Imperium Games' terms of service for their website. They actively block botting through Cloudflare and other providers, and yet somehow all these ships are selling out immediately within milliseconds of them coming online. In fact, if you're a concierge member, you can go to the forum right now and find people talking about how they actively botted to get these ships and actively encourage other people to bot because that's how you should be doing this. At the end of the day, I'm not trying to start a witch hunt here, but I do think it's incredibly interesting to see that these ships have become very, very highly sought after. CIG is quite reluctant to sell more of them for a multitude of reasons, which I'm happy to go into. But that doesn't really matter. I think the main thing here is not enough are being sold. Now, there's always the argument of game balance. Will these ships break the game when they come out in 1.0 and some people already have a Javelin? I would say yes. However, the game is already broken. The balance of this game will never function, in my mind, on day 1 of 1.0, not for the capital ships, but for the mid-tier ships. A Javelin will be awesome to look at on day 1, but good luck paying to refuel it. Good luck finding the endgame content that it's made for on day 1. The mid-tier ships will be able to absolutely dominate the beginner players, dominate the people who are in the Mustang Alphas, and they won't cost the same to repair. They won't cost the same to refuel. The punishment for losing a mid-tier ship is substantially less than losing an Idris or a Javelin. So while yes, a Javelin on day 1 is terrifying, the reality is it will be such a bare bones operation to try and run the thing. It's frankly not going to be the biggest problem in the game. If you took, let's say, 30 people to crew a Javelin and put them all in Paladins, now we suddenly have something that a beginner player couldn't get around in any way, shape, or form. Anyway, I digress. The goal here is not to talk about how to balance the game. So just to say, if you did find this interesting, I'd be really, really grateful if you subscribe to the channel or go support me on Ko-fi. This did take a lot of work, so if you want to buy me a coffee over there, that'd be lovely, as it's getting very, very late. I'm going to give a quick shout out to whoever can count the amount of spelling errors in this PowerPoint. And also a huge thank you to everyone who has been liking and commenting my videos over the last few months. It's really helped and I've loved to see your channel grow. If you were someone who tried to buy a Javelin or an Idris or any hull limited ship over IAE, I'd really love to hear from you. So if you could leave a comment explaining how you thought it went, please do so and I would love to hear from you. And that's all, folks. I really hope you found this interesting. Congratulations to the 1,000 people who managed to buy an Idris in Fleetweek and the 700 who managed to buy a ship in IE. And I'll hopefully see you all on the verse.